What I'm looking for is the girl that's in the house. How are you? I'm gonna make her in front of her.
It's a viral video that is so chilling, it puts an entire neighborhood on edge.
Lock the door, check the deadbolt just in case a stranger knocks on your front door.
The woman is home alone. She's doing the dishes.
I just rang your doorbell because I have a couple questions for you.
This creepy guy is standing at her door, just something like out of a horror movie.
I just have a couple questions for you. Are you sure? Are you positive? I just have a couple questions for you.
Repeating the same line over and over.
Are you sure? Are you positive? Are you sure?
The woman is terrified. She has no idea who this strange man is.
Are you sure?
She frantically dials her husband, who immediately hangs up so he can patch into the doorbell intercom.
So, who are you? What? Yeah? Who are you?
Her partner must be feeling so helpless. He's not home, and he's having this conversation through the Ring doorbell.
Who are you? Hey, I just had a couple questions. I just wanted to ask you about what I'm looking for is the girl that's in the house to come out here because I'm gonna rape her and kill her.
He's the most calm, collected criminal I've ever seen.
You have her open the door?
He doesn't seem to be worried about the cops showing up, and he really just politely almost is asking to get inside the house to do terrible things.
The wife has dialed 911 and the operator is on the phone with her. But they don't know if the man is mentally unstable, high on something, or just evil.
Rape and kill the girl that's on the other side of the store when she lets me in. I want to rape her and kill her because I have a knife and a gun.
I would absolutely believe what he said 100%. Anyone who would lay out that they want to rape and kill me on a video camera is probably going to do it. I have to imagine in that moment, the husband is freaking out. This guy is standing there in this dingy tank top, scraggly beard, saying that he wants to rape and kill his wife. And then he continues to knock.
And I'm gonna knock on her door again.
This guy has a bag with him, and I can only imagine the contents of that bag are not good. Rope, tape, weapons. I imagine nothing good is in that bag.
I have a knife and a gun. And I'm gonna knock on her door again.
After making ominous threats, the man suddenly backs away. But is this really over?
Are you sure? No idea. What?
He's kind of walking away from the house, mumbling to himself, looking back, trying to see any signs of life through the window or something.
What?
He doesn't appear to have a phone or earbuds in, so who could he be talking to?
Not knowing who the man is or where he went is harrowing. But at least his face is captured on the doorbell camera.
That same evening, this woman who was in the home immediately posts this to social media.
The video instantly goes viral.
Terrifying moments for a downtown Las Vegas homeowner who posted this video on social media.
They shared it on Facebook just so neighbors could be aware.
This video was shared online more than 78,000 times.
And that helps police track down the creepy stranger the very next morning.
An alert citizen recognizes him from the viral video. She sees him walking past her place of work and points him out to a police officer.
Standing on the corner, like at the crosswalk. And I'm like, wait, that's a guy I seen this morning.
He is identified as Christopher Sums, and police learn that he's wanted in 2 other states.
actually a fugitive from California and had been wanted there for stalking.
Sums is hit with multiple charges, including aggravated stalking and coercing with threat of force. He's ordered to get drug and alcohol counseling, but is found competent to stand trial and sentenced to up to 5 years. The woman he terrorized asks for privacy, but Karen Stewart, who is responsible for his arrest, is publicly honored.
Citizens being recognized for protecting our community.
People were creeped out by this video and wanted him arrested, so they were going to look for him however they could find him, and they did just that.
In New York, another woman is also confronted by frightening strangers as her 3-year-old watches.
As a mom, it would 100% have an impact on me.
We're looking at surveillance footage of the lobby of an apartment building. A mother is coming down the stairs with her 3-year-old son.
Something she's probably done dozens of times.
She sees 2 men standing in the lobby. At first, it seems like nothing to worry about, but cameras reveal they've been lurking here for more than an hour.
It looks like they're just waiting for the elevator, but then they turn, they pull a gun out, and they force her up against the wall. They point a gun at her, and then they point the gun at her son, and she's like, "Don't point the gun at my son."
As a mom to a 3-year-old, if something like this happened, it's the first thing you think about is your child. I can only imagine what she was feeling like, wanting to protect her child in this situation.
She has to imagine that these criminals are completely dangerous and not all there. And what could they do if they're willing to point a gun at a child?
They demand that she hand over everything she has and threaten to take her son if she doesn't.
If you're in this type of situation, let it all go. Whatever they want, just give it to them. Those items can be replaced later.
Panicked, she pleads for her son's life, but the men silence her. And to her horror, they tug at her little boy.
This video is absolutely terrifying.
With a gun pointed at her toddler, the petrified mom hands over her car keys, phone, and the cash in her wallet. And after a few nightmarish seconds, the men suddenly flee.
It could be possibly that they were waiting for the right person to victimize. And in this case, this is a mom who is holding the hand of her child. And that may be why they chose her.
To make their getaway, the men steal the mother's car. But first, they do something puzzling.
When they get to the car, they actually take the car seat out. Why they would take the time when they're stealing an actual car to remove the car seat, who knows?
As police hunt for the men, they turn to the local media for help.
Well, surveillance video out of the Bronx shows a pair of suspected thieves walking off with a single mom's belongings.
The traumatized mother speaks to reporters.
She told us he put his hand on her mouth and said, "Shut up, shut up, shut up." He put the gun to her body and she said, "Don't touch my son." But then they put the gun right against his head anyway.
Es el peor momento de mi vida.
The worst moment of your life.
Yeah.
For a child, it's a horrifying and potentially damaging experience.
3-year-olds are smart, and they come up with a lot of questions. And sometimes it's something that may come on years later.
This kid is going to remember this event for quite a while. And for however many years this kid's going to remember this event is probably how long you need to stay in jail.
As the story goes viral, people are outraged. Even the city's mayor weighs in. But 3 days later, police catch a break.
In this day and age of technology, investigators were able to track the vehicle through its GPS.
A few days later, police arrest one of the men, 23-year-old Carlos Guzman. He's charged with second-degree robbery and sentenced to 5 years. The second culprit, Wagner Argamonte, is arrested a month later and charged with first-degree robbery. Police believe it was a random attack.
This mother did nothing wrong. This child did nothing wrong. And unfortunately, they were victimized. It's in these types of situations, it doesn't matter how familiar you are with your surroundings sometimes, you just never know when you could become a victim.
And that's exactly what happens to this man in Maryland.
Gun?
Yeah, he has a gun, baby.
It's a brutal attack. Right in front of his family.
The family saying they do not know this man.
Let go!
Let him go!
Oh, no! Stop! Don't do it!
It begins when a man and woman passing by this apartment complex see something shocking.
Gun?
Yeah, he has a gun, baby.
They instinctively start recording on their cell phone. One of the men they are videotaping is Carlos Quezada. He's in the red shirt. He's just stepped out for the night with his family when the other man sneaks up behind him.
This all starts when Carlos is exiting his apartment complex. The gunman approaches him, instructs him to put his arms behind his back. He decides not to do so. He realizes the situation's gonna get bad, proceeds to fight the suspect over the gun.
No! Stop! Don't do it!
Carlos is pinned to the ground, and the gunman is holding a revolver right to his chest.
What are you doing, bro?
And then the gun goes off.
Carlos has been shot twice.
Horrified witnesses are gathering around watching these events unfold, kind of not knowing what to do.
Police are on the way, but the shooter keeps Carlos locked to the ground.
Oh, no! Stop! Don't do it!
It looks like he's trying to shoot Carlos again.
We're watching them wrestling on the ground until...
Don't do it!
We hear that gun click.
And amazingly, the gun misfires.
Now, brave bystanders seize the chance to help Carlos.
This is a really frantic scene. You got people screaming for help.
Ayúdale, ayúdale!
And you have multiple individuals fighting over a gun. It could go off in any direction. People's lives are at stake here.
They're holding the suspect there until police arrive.
One woman refuses to back down, even as others try to pull her away.
What we don't realize in that moment, though, is that that is the man's sister.
And Carlos's sister is enraged.
She's gonna do whatever she can to save her brother. This is obviously a traumatizing situation for the entire family. Nobody should ever witness this.
Carlos is rushed to the hospital. He's been shot in the leg and the chest and has a collapsed lung.
It's really incredible that Carlos survived this situation. When the firearm is later recovered, there is a live round still in the revolver.
The gunman is arrested immediately.
The shooter is identified as 24-year-old Marcus Elijah Conway.
He doesn't reveal why he shot Carlos, but he's hit with multiple charges, including attempted second-degree murder and first-degree assault. He is still awaiting trial, and it turns out he has 3 prior felony convictions.
So he should not have been in possession of a firearm. But as we know, most felons don't follow the rules.
The video of the harrowing scene goes viral as soon as it hits the news.
The man shot twice after leaving his apartment.
Good Samaritans are seen jumping in to help a man struggling with the person who just shot him.
The gunman put a revolver to her brother's head.
The victim's protective sister also speaks to reporters.
She tells me at first she froze in shock and then jumped out of the car screaming for help and trying to stop traffic as her brother struggled with the suspect on the ground.
People are stunned that so many bystanders risked their own lives to help Carlos.
I would absolutely consider these Good Samaritans heroes. They decided to act when they didn't have to. I'm glad they acted as fast as they did because I believe they saved Carlos's life.
In Florida, a different kind of attempt to save someone leads to viral infamy.
In this moment, these kids are thinking, oh, this is going to make a great TikTok.
What's your problem?
Oh, please.
It's spring break in Clearwater, Florida, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of college kids on the beach having a good time.
Which means a bunch of 19-year-olds drunk out of their mind, just living what they think is their best life on the beach. I feel bad for all the officers that found out they are working this week.
You're there in a bulletproof vest in 90-degree weather. It's not fun.
So this video kicks off with a fight.
3 people came up to me, they're like they wanted to fight me. Stop! Oh, bro! Sir, I was scared for my life. You were on top of him, bro!
Which the police came to break this fight up and arrested some people.
Get off, bro!
Including Dominic Glass, who was handcuffed in the back of the car.
Bro, like, chill. What am I doing wrong? Hey, LP, get this on camera, you stupid bitch.
It's chaotic. People are clearly intoxicated.
Back up, bro. Take these cuffs off me, bro.
At this point, there are hundreds of kids standing around the vehicle, and it's 2 or 3 officers amongst a very large group of people. Everyone has their phone out, and as an officer, you always have to be aware of that person who may be trying to create that next viral moment.
And suddenly...
So we're watching this guy literally open a police car door to let the guy in the back escape, and he runs off.
Police immediately run after him, but so does the crowd.
Now, at this point, it gets pretty chaotic. Everyone wants to be in on the viral moment, so he's running away while in handcuffs.
I don't really know what's going through their heads right now. I don't think they know. I think they're just thinking, oh, now this looks like a lot of fun, and not, oh, we're on a crime scene.
Now officers realize what has just transpired. They had someone who's in handcuffs, so not only was he being detained, but they are also responsible for his safety, so they need to get him under control as fast as possible.
The wild chase is captured from a variety of angles by many of the young onlookers.
So near the end of this clip, you can see that an officer is able to cut off the young gentleman that was in handcuffs. It seems that he deploys a taser. I really don't think that the young man realizes the type of trouble he's in.
Back up now! Back up!
Congratulations. You're gonna get escaping charges.
What could have just been something where he was written up for fighting on the beach, maybe issued a citation, now he's looking at some serious charges. They put him back in the cruiser, and they make the right decision this time by pulling the cruiser away from the crowd.
And now the young escape artist is a tad winded.
Holy bro. What other information do you need to get me out of this car and give me some air, boss?
Within hours, the video is all over social media platforms and instantly goes viral.
Tonight we have this viral spring break moment.
The video is going viral on TikTok.
18-year-old Dominic Glass makes a run for it.
Glass is arrested. He pleads guilty to resisting an officer without violence and is ordered to pay a fine. But police also want to find his accomplice.
They're looking for the guy who helped him make this getaway in the first place.
It doesn't take long to identify him.
He posted online that he was the guy who opened the door, I think because he wanted some attention.
His name is Adam Assad.
Unfortunately for him, investigators also see his post.
The next day, police make a post of their own.
Adam really wanted attention from all of this, and the police did give him attention by tweeting out his mugshot, saying he's going to be famous for going to jail.
Assad is charged with obstructing an arrest without violence and aiding an escape. But after completing a court-ordered program for nonviolent offenses, his case is dismissed.
I think it's clear to say that the infamy or the celebrity that came with this, that momentary viral moment, wasn't worth what they had to go through, because although everyone was laughing and running with them at the time, They weren't the ones doing the community service with him, I can guarantee you that.
It's a bizarre incident that wreaks havoc on a quiet neighborhood.
Honestly thought it was like a dream, like what's actually happening right now.
It all begins around 4:30 in the morning. Jose and Brenna live with their 2 young kids on this suburban street.
So it's relatively quiet, and out of nowhere, we see a white pickup truck fly through that intersection without even hitting his brakes.
We had just come to bed, and all of a sudden we just heard this sound.
Driving through not only a tree, but a car, and also hitting the brick wall of this house.
And I immediately said, we have to go check the girls.
Inside, the couple's 2 daughters are sleeping.
So my first thought was check the baby's room, and we ran in there first, and she was okay.
Panicked, they race to their 12-year-old's room.
And she met us in the hall and said that this crash shook her whole room. She was so scared.
This was a bad situation, but it could have been a lot worse. If it wasn't for that small tree and that vehicle in the front yard, that truck would have driven directly into the bedroom of that small girl.
He was just barreling because we're like in the neighborhood, so it's 35 here. He must have gone like 55.
So at this point, the driver of the truck proceeds to try to back out of the yard, running back over the tree.
He was stuck on that tree for so long.
Yeah.
And at any point he could have stopped and gone, okay, I've done something wrong. I need to go make this right. And he didn't.
I was honestly going out there to make sure he was okay and not dead or something, but now he decided to just take off.
That's when he got on the cameras and checked the footage.
So from the footage, you actually have a pretty good shot of the driver. You can see that he's a heavy-set individual, and more importantly, he's wearing what appears to be some type of reflective vest.
I would assume somebody in a reflective jacket or vest is working in construction. It wouldn't be so far-fetched to imagine somebody who's working extremely long hours, maybe falling asleep, unfortunately, behind the wheel.
He doesn't appear to hit his brakes at all, so I would really want to know why that is.
We think he ran into the house because he was inebriated. There was no way that he didn't notice that he was about to hit a house without being under the influence of something.
He decides to leave the scene of the accident without checking to make sure that no one's injured or reporting it to the owners of the vehicle and the house. Now you have failure to stop, duty to stop, which would be a misdemeanor in most states.
The next day, the news is all over this wild story.
Police are trying to find the driver who, as you can see here, careened at nearly full speed into this house in North Lubbock today.
Who is this out-of-control driver? And where is he? After a car careens into a house in the middle of the night, then takes off, police are determined to find the driver.
Officers actually catch the driver later in the day when they respond to a domestic dispute, and as they arrive, they see the banged up truck in the front yard. There's tree branches, there's grass in the front grill.
The man is also wearing the same reflective vest as the man in the video. And after questioning, police have probable cause to suspect he was the driver. He is released pending charges. For Brenna and Jose, it turns out to be just one of that month's life-changing events.
One of the less crazy twists, but unfortunate twists for this couple, is that the next week, they were getting married.
We were 9 days away from getting married in Las Vegas when this happened, and that was just not the stress that we needed at the time.
I mean, we were already stressed as it was.
Yeah.
So anybody out there who has planned a wedding knows how stressful that is. Imagine having this catastrophic event on top of that.
But the wedding goes off without a hitch. And number one on these newlyweds to-do list, some home upgrades.
We would really like to go to Target and steal those big red balls that they have out in front and put a few in front of the house just to be safe.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that the residents had video footage. More importantly, I'm glad that they had their vehicle parked in front of the house, because if it hadn't been there, this could have been a lot worse of a story.
And when people are angry, things can go from bad to worse in a hurry. This video of a criminal who refuses to go down without a fight is an epic viral hit.
I'm just like, when is the chaos going to stop?
It begins in a city just outside Rio de Janeiro, where a woman stands on a sidewalk lost in her phone.
She's so focused on the phone, she doesn't even notice the person on the bike right next to her.
For a moment, it looks like nothing.
We use our phones for everything. We probably have pictures of our ID. We have, our wallets with our credit card information. So when someone takes it, it's like they've taken a huge chunk of ourselves personally. So it is a really personal theft.
And then something shocking happens.
Just when you think, oh, it can't get more crazy, it gets crazier.
Wow, this guy just ran over someone for a phone. That's like pretty incredible. The bike is pinned under the vehicle. The suspect starts running.
Adrenaline has to be a factor here. He's up and he's running after getting hit by a car.
Now, a hot pursuit is underway. But why is the driver of the car joining in?
The guy in the vehicle jumps out and starts chasing after the phone thief.
I would think no phone is worth whatever is going to happen next, but he darts away.
The thief stumbles around the block, but just when he thinks he's dodged everybody,
almost out of thin air, we see this man kicking the guy in the head, like truly like he has a black belt in karate or something.
You have to imagine this guy has been waiting for this moment his entire life. I mean, how often do you get to do flying karate kicks in the air? Never.
If I was him, throw the phone on the ground, say I'm sorry, and hopefully have an escape route.
And now, a whole crowd of people has joined in to attack the phone thief.
Mob mentality is a thing. And, when one person starts hitting a criminal, it's a lot easier for other people to get involved. I don't know if this is some robber that has been in the neighborhood that people have been trying to capture for a while, or this is just a one-time occurrence, but they are going to pummel this guy until police arrive.
I'm freaking out right now watching him being surrounded because of all the intensity going on at this point. I really don't know how this is going to end. Is this a movie? Where is the special effects coming on? The worst possible scenario that could be happening right now is him dying over this phone.
When a mob descends on a man who stole a woman's phone, things start to spiral out of control. Luckily, police show up after a few minutes, and the 23-year-old suspect is treated at a hospital, then taken into custody.
The thief is charged with robbery. Local news reported that the suspect had a gun and it fell to the ground, but that somebody picked it up and took it away, so the gun was never recovered.
And there's a surprising twist. Remember that driver who rammed into the thief after he snatched the woman's phone?
Turns out we discover that is not just a random driver, it's her boyfriend who was arriving at the same time.
The video caught on local security cameras is posted all over the internet and racks up more than 9 million views. A lot of people on social media commend the woman's boyfriend for coming to her rescue.
The boyfriend has to feel like he's the hero in the situation. But why was he so scared about his girlfriend's phone being stolen? Was there something on that phone he didn't want other people to see?
Whatever the boyfriend's motive was, this criminal should consider himself lucky.
This could have possibly turned into a much more deadly situation. If the mob had decided that they wanted to have street justice, they could have ended his life.
I don't think he even was realizing all of this was gonna happen from stealing a phone.
Other crooks seem to forget that there are cameras everywhere. This is a bold arson, recorded from the moment it begins.
I mean, everyone should get a doorbell camera after this.
Almost everyone has a doorbell camera these days. Sometimes they capture life's funniest moments. But in this case, we see horror unfolding in real time.
A white guy in a hoodie comes up to the doorbell. He's trying to hide himself, and then he sort of gives up, and then he just starts spraying liquid all over the camera and all over the house, and then lights it on fire.
What this suspect may possibly have thought is that if he burns the camera or puts, something on it or something along those lines, that the video won't pick up everything. But what he doesn't realize is if you have one of these cameras at home, it's like a live feed.
William Sanders, the homeowner, is at a friend's house having dinner, and he gets an alert from his doorbell camera, sees this guy, and sees his house being set on fire.
As he watches in shock, he feels helpless. But he's miles away. All he can do is call the fire department.
This is a terrifying situation for this homeowner.
The first thing he has to be thinking is, all of my possessions, all of my memories are about to be lost. Luckily, the neighbors actually come over and they start hosing off the house. Then the fire department eventually comes, but they were able to salvage the house.
The homeowner has no idea who this man is or why he would do this. So he turns to the local media for help.
It's thanks to this doorbell camera that he saw those flames were right outside his home, and a complete stranger was the one who set fire.
Personal opinion is they got the wrong house. They should have been somewhere else.
You've never seen this guy
I've not seen this gentleman before.
You don't have beef with anybody?
No.
Police released the image of the mysterious arsonist to the public.
People came forward. They were able to identify the person in this video.
And when police show up to apprehend him, he's actually wearing the same shirt that he was the day that he set fire to William's house.
36-year-old Justin Wingham is charged with arson and criminal damage.
Doorbell cameras can be a fantastic resource and can also help investigators in many crimes.
And in William's case, that camera prevented what could have been a complete tragedy.
William's front porch could be replaced. Thankfully, he still has all of his memories inside of his house. And that day, no one was injured. That's the best news of all.
Another porch crime in Canada turns into a nightmare for the would-be thief.
Yeah, it's done. You're done. Oh, please, now!
Porch pirates, Thieves who steal your packages right off your front doorstep are becoming a persistent nuisance.
You're done.
It's happening in every neighborhood all over North America.
A would-be porch pirate is facing charges.
You're done. Cops is coming.
I hate it when this happens, when you got a small car, Mr. B-Town.
Oh, let's go into the snowbank.
4 days into the new year, a couple just outside Toronto wakes up to the sound of someone at their door. The startled porch pirate bolts to his getaway car.
You're done. Cops is coming. Cops is coming. Call the police, now. You call?
I'm calling.
The wife is so frazzled by the situation.
It's going to your number. I don't know the number.
She's like, I need to call the police, but what's the number to police?
You're done.
It's literally a train wreck of a car getaway.
Look, Dan, your wheels are not spinning anywhere.
You're caught!
The wheels of the car are going full force, but nothing is happening.
It's only 7 seconds from the time he's busted to the time he gets to his car. But it seems like he is stuck on the snowbank for eternity.
Want me to get you a shovel?
While the wife is running around trying to figure out the number and call police, the husband actually offers the porch pirate a shovel.
I get you a shovel.
This is the most stereotypical Canadian crime of all time because you have the person who's the victim trying to help the criminal out. You don't see that here in America.
He's trying to dig and dig the snow away from his wheels, but the wheels aren't even touching the ground.
It's front-wheel drive. You need to get the wheels on the ground.
I'm getting an extreme sense of secondhand embarrassment from this video.
The wheel is not even on the ground. You need to get the wheel on the ground.
It's almost to the point where I want to turn it off, but I also have to keep watching to see if he can get off of the snowbank.
The police are coming. Just forget it. Okay, well.
I think he is sincerely sorry that he decided to be a porch pirate this day.
Your wheels are not spinning anywhere.
You're caught! No mercy.
It seems like the husband is really calmed down. The entire time the wife is really angry.
You ass!
She just wants this guy to get arrested.
After 6 minutes of futile tire spinning, police arrive.
When the police do show up, the suspect is sitting in his car.
Seriously, he's gonna take a sip of water right now?
And he actually takes a sip of water, which enrages the wife even more.
Hands up. Get out of the car now!
Once the homeowner's cell phone footage hits the internet, it's a viral hit with millions of views. For newscasters, it's a struggle to maintain composure.
He's trying to peel out of there and front-wheel drive car, it's beached. It's not going anywhere.
The homeowner, well, they've already called 911 by now. Now all they can do is sit back and watch the show.
He was stuck in a bit of a pickle there, like literally.
At a press conference, even the police can't stifle their laughter.
Once they get there, sure enough, that individual's still struggling with that vehicle. It is quite comical. Just watching the car after he jumps in, tries to reverse out, gets stuck on the snow, and the wheels are just turning.
I feel if we didn't have the police coming to arrest this guy, we would have seen the entire neighborhood get together to help this man get his car off the snow.
On social media, the hapless thief takes a beating.
Anyone who lives in Canada should definitely know how to maneuver a snowbank.
Ultimately, this porch pirate is arrested for theft. Can't imagine the police not laughing at him the entire way to the station.
The 33-year-old porch pirate is charged with fraud and theft under $5,000.
If I was this porch pirate, I would have just stayed home or waited for spring.
And there's a lesson here for all homeowners.
I feel my advice for anybody who owns a home and doesn't want a porch pirate is to know when your packages are arriving or just go to the store.
Get down the car now!
At 6:42 a.m., the phone rang in a quiet Ohio house where nothing ever happened fast. It rang long enough to feel wrong, long enough to wake a man who would later swear that, in that moment before he answered, he already knew something was broken forever. Outside, the sky was low and colorless, winter clinging to the edges of March, and the street looked exactly the way it always had. Parked cars dusted with salt, lawns flattened by cold, a silence so ordinary it felt safe. By the time the receiver was lifted, by the time a voice on the other end struggled to form words, the clock was already ticking on a story that would refuse to end. A cold case that would harden year by year, leaving behind questions no one could bury. The victim's name would soon be everywhere. On local news crawls, on flyers taped to telephone poles, on the lips of neighbors who spoke it softly as if saying it too loudly might summon something back. In 2003, Ohio was not expecting a mystery. It was expecting routine. People went to work, kids caught buses, diners opened before sunrise. The crime didn't arrive with a scream. It arrived quietly, slipping into the gaps of a normal morning, leaving a scene that looked almost careful, almost deliberate, as if whoever was responsible had taken their time, confident they would not be interrupted. Police would later say the house showed no signs of forced entry. The door was closed, the windows intact. Inside, the air was heavy, still, the kind of stillness that presses against the ears. There were no overturned tables, no shattered glass, no obvious struggle, just absence. Just the wrongness of a space where someone should have been breathing. It was the kind of scene that unsettles seasoned officers because it suggests intention, familiarity, a hand that knew where it was going. Within hours, the neighborhood was sealed off by yellow tape that fluttered uselessly in the wind. Squad cars lined the street, their lights flashing without sirens, painting the houses red and blue like a warning no one had asked for. Neighbors gathered at the edges, arms crossed, whispering fragments of speculation. They knew the victim, or they thought they did. A quiet life, predictable routines, no enemies anyone could name. That, more than anything, is what made the case sink its teeth into the community. There was no obvious reason, no easy answer waiting at the surface. Investigators moved through the house with cameras and gloves, cataloging the ordinary. A coffee mug in the sink, shoes by the door, a jacket draped over the back of a chair, as if it would be needed later. Every object became a question mark. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret just out of reach. They collected fibers, fingerprints, samples so small they looked meaningless, sealing them into evidence bags that would later sit untouched for years. At the time, no one imagined how long those bags would wait. By noon, the story had spread beyond the block. Local radio broke in with a developing situation. Television vans arrived, their antennas rising like mechanical insects. Reporters spoke in urgent tones, using phrases that would become familiar: mysterious circumstances, active investigation, no suspect at this time. The word cold case hovered in the background, not yet spoken but already forming, a future label waiting for the moment when leads dried up and hope thinned. Friends and family were interviewed in living rooms that smelled faintly of coffee and panic. They described the victim in simple terms: kind, reliable, normal. Too normal. Investigators listened carefully, looking for cracks, for contradictions, for anything that hinted at a hidden life. But the stories aligned too well. Work, home, occasional errands. No recent arguments anyone could recall. No threats. No warning signs. The absence of drama became its own kind of evidence, and not the helpful kind. The first timeline was built quickly, then rebuilt again. Last confirmed sighting, last phone call, last transaction on a debit card. Each timestamp was pinned like a marker on a map, but the path between them refused to appear. Somewhere between the ordinary moments, something catastrophic had happened, and no one could say when or how. The window of opportunity was wide enough for dozens of theories to slip through. Detectives knocked on doors up and down the street. Did anyone hear anything unusual? A car engine late at night. Voices. A door closing. Most shook their heads. A few mentioned vague sounds they hadn't thought important at the time. A noise around midnight. Footsteps. Nothing concrete. Memory, investigators would learn, is a fragile witness, easily shaped by fear and hindsight. As days passed, the pressure mounted. The department assigned more resources, more manpower. Tips flooded in, some earnest, some wild, some clearly motivated by grudges or boredom. Each one had to be chased down, logged, eliminated. A man seen loitering weeks earlier. A strange vehicle parked too long. A rumor about a personal conflict no one could verify. The case grew heavier with each dead end, dragging behind it a trail of paperwork and unanswered questions. Then there were the objects that didn't belong. Or maybe did. A small detail discovered late, overlooked in the first sweep, then elevated to potential significance. Investigators debated it under harsh fluorescent lights, voices low, cautious. Was it evidence or coincidence? In a case with so little to hold on to, even the smallest anomaly felt enormous. It was photographed, measured, bagged, and added to the growing list of maybes. By the end of the first week, the language began to change. Officials spoke more carefully. No immediate danger to the public. Continuing to pursue multiple angles. Behind closed doors, frustration simmered. The case was not behaving the way it was supposed to. There was no clear narrative, no obvious suspect to circle on a board. Just a life interrupted and a void where answers should have been. The community reacted in waves. First shock, then fear. Parents walked children to school who had been walking alone for years. Doors were locked earlier. Porch lights stayed on all night. Conversations at grocery stores lowered to whispers when the topic came up, as if the killer might be listening. Ohio had seen crimes before, but this one felt personal, invasive. It suggested that the familiar could turn lethal without warning. Vigils were held. Candles flickered in the cold air, wax dripping onto sidewalks as people stood shoulder to shoulder, searching for comfort in numbers. Speakers talked about justice, about memory, about refusing to let the victim become just another headline. Cameras recorded tears, trembling voices, promises that this would not be forgotten. At that moment, no one believed how hard keeping that promise would be. Weeks stretched into months. The investigation slowed, not from lack of effort but from lack of traction. Detectives revisited the scene, re-interviewed witnesses, re-examined evidence. The same questions produced the same answers. Somewhere, something critical was missing. Or perhaps it had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. Files grew thicker. Boxes filled shelves. The case began to age. New crimes demanded attention. New emergencies pulled resources away. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, the investigation shifted from active pursuit to maintenance. Leads were followed when they appeared, but the urgency dulled. The phrase cold case was no longer hovering. It was spoken aloud, reluctantly, like an admission of failure no one wanted to make. Years later, detectives would look back at those early days and argue about what should have been done differently. Should they have pushed harder on a particular angle? Taken one witness more seriously? Preserved something they dismissed as irrelevant? Hindsight would sharpen every decision into a potential mistake. But in 2003, standing in that silent house, surrounded by the ordinary debris of a life interrupted, they were working in the dark, unaware of how long that darkness would last. The victim's name faded from the news cycle, replaced by newer tragedies, fresher headlines. But in that Ohio town, it never fully disappeared. It lingered in empty rooms, in routines altered forever, in the quiet understanding that something unresolved still lived among them. The case was officially unsolved, but unofficially it was everywhere. An unspoken presence that turned ordinary mornings uneasy. And somewhere, locked away in an evidence room, sat items collected in haste and hope, tagged and dated, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone to look at them differently, waiting for a future that, in 2003, no one could yet imagine. Time did not heal the silence left behind by the case. It sharpened it. In the months after the crime, the house became a landmark of discomfort, a place people slowed past without meaning to, eyes drawn to windows that revealed nothing. The lawn was trimmed, the mail collected, but the life that once filled the rooms was gone, replaced by an echo that refused to fade. Investigators returned again and again, stepping over the same thresholds, hoping repetition might reveal what urgency had missed. They rebuilt the final day hour by hour, then minute by minute. Morning routines were dissected, phone logs scrutinized, receipts examined like fragments of prophecy. Somewhere between a routine errand and a quiet evening, the timeline fractured. There was a gap that no witness could fill, a stretch of time that remained stubbornly opaque. That gap became the center of the investigation, a black hole pulling every theory toward it. Detectives interviewed coworkers who described nothing unusual. No arguments, no sudden changes in behavior. Supervisors remembered punctuality, reliability, the kind of employee who didn't draw attention. Friends echoed the same sentiment, a steady presence, predictable, safe. The absence of drama felt almost rehearsed, as if the victim's life had been designed to leave no obvious trail. Then there were the near misses. A neighbor who thought they remembered a car idling longer than usual. A delivery driver who recalled a door opening, then closing, too quickly to see who was inside. Each recollection arrived late, distorted by time and media coverage. Investigators chased them anyway, driving routes at the same hour, standing in the same spots, trying to see what those witnesses claimed to have seen. Nothing aligned cleanly enough to hold. The press, restless for answers, began framing the story in sharper terms. Cold case looms, one headline warned. Mysterious Ohio killing still unsolved, another declared. The words seeped into public consciousness, shaping perception. Speculation flourished where facts were scarce. Online forums filled with theories that spiraled outward. Secret relationships, hidden debts, double lives. Most collapsed under scrutiny, but not before adding noise to an already crowded investigation. Inside the department, the case board grew dense with notes, photographs, arrows connecting names to places to dates. It looked impressive. It looked busy. It did not produce a suspect. Every line drawn felt provisional, subject to erasure. Detectives argued quietly, voices edged with fatigue, about which direction deserved more attention. Resources were finite. Time was not on their side. One theory lingered longer than the others, that the person responsible was someone the victim knew. The lack of forced entry suggested trust or at least familiarity. Someone welcomed inside. Someone who knew the routines, the layout, the rhythms of the house. That possibility narrowed the field and widened the discomfort. It meant the answer might be unremarkable, hidden among people who had already been interviewed, already been cleared, already been forgotten. Background checks were run again, this time with deeper scrutiny. Alibis were re-examined, timelines tested against phone records and work schedules. Some held, others frayed at the edges but never fully unraveled. Suspicion hovered without landing. No one crossed the invisible line from person of interest to suspect. As months turned into a year, the investigation's tone shifted. Detectives stopped talking about breakthroughs and started talking about preservation. Evidence was logged, sealed, stored. The hope was no longer immediate resolution but future possibility. Advances in technology were mentioned in briefings, spoken like distant promises. DNA analysis was improving. Databases were expanding. Someday, they said, something might change. The family felt that change differently. For them, time stretched unbearably thin. Every phone call sparked a flicker of hope. Every silence felt like abandonment. They replayed memories, searching for overlooked details, moments that might have mattered more than they realized. Guilt crept in quietly, disguised as reflection. What if they had noticed something? What if they had asked one more question? Anniversaries brought renewed attention. Candles again. Speeches again. Cameras again. Detectives stood at the edges, answering the same questions with the same careful phrasing. The case remains open. We encourage anyone with information to come forward. The words sounded procedural, but behind them was a truth harder to articulate. The trail was cold, and warming it again would require something extraordinary. Inside the evidence room, boxes gathered dust. Each tag represented a decision made under pressure, a judgment call about what mattered. Some items were revisited, sent for testing that hadn't been available before. Results came back inconclusive, partial profiles, nothing definitive. Each report ended with the same frustrating caveat: insufficient for identification. The community adapted in subtle ways. The initial fear dulled into a low-grade unease that never fully disappeared. New families moved in, unaware of the details but sensitive to the mood. Longtime residents spoke of the case in fragments, as if recounting a bad dream. It became part of the town's identity, an unresolved chapter no one wanted to read aloud. Detectives retired. New ones inherited the file, opening boxes their predecessors had sealed years earlier. Fresh eyes scanned old reports, noticing patterns that once seemed irrelevant. They questioned assumptions, challenged conclusions that had calcified over time. Sometimes, distance provided clarity. Sometimes, it only revealed how much had been lost. One investigator fixated on a minor inconsistency in an early statement, a detail dismissed as stress-induced error. He traced it back through interviews, comparing versions, looking for drift. The differences were subtle, almost imperceptible, but they nagged at him. Why had that detail changed? What pressure had reshaped it? He flagged it, added a note to the file, and moved on. There was no immediate path forward, but the seed was planted. Another revisited physical evidence, holding items up to the light, literally and figuratively. He wondered what the original team had been thinking, what they might have overlooked in the rush to secure the scene. In crimes defined by chaos, order can obscure as much as it reveals. The house had been quiet, too quiet. What did that say about the moments before? Still, nothing broke open. The case endured, suspended between past and future. It was referenced in training sessions, cited as an example of how easily certainty could slip away. New detectives learned its contours like a cautionary tale. Familiarity did not breed resolution. It bred respect for the unknown. Years passed. Technology advanced. Databases grew vast, interconnected. The promise of answers resurfaced in conference rooms and memos. Evidence was resubmitted, profiles uploaded, comparisons run against millions of records. Each attempt carried a whisper of anticipation. Each failure reinforced the case's reputation as stubborn, resistant, almost willful in its refusal to yield. And yet, beneath the accumulation of dead ends, something remained unresolved. Not just the crime, but the sense that it was solvable. That the pieces existed, scattered and misaligned, waiting for the right angle, the right moment. The cold case was not dormant. It was patient. Somewhere in Ohio, the house still stood. Somewhere in storage, evidence still waited. And somewhere, whether close or far, the truth remained intact, untouched by time, ready to surface when least expected. By the time the case crossed its 5th year, it had shed the urgency of headlines and taken on the weight of legend. New detectives learned its name the way rookies learn street corners with bad histories, quietly, with a mix of curiosity and caution. It was no longer just an investigation. It was a presence, a file that seemed to watch whoever opened it, daring them to see what others had missed. The evidence list read like a catalog of restraint. No dramatic blood patterns, no shattered furniture, no obvious weapon recovered. What existed instead were traces, partial impressions, faint residues, fragments that suggested movement without revealing direction. The scene had been clean but not sterile. Someone had been careful but not perfect. That distinction mattered. It whispered that mistakes had been made, even if they were microscopic. A new lead surfaced not with a bang, but with a question. A clerk reviewing old call records noticed a discrepancy in the timing of a routine check-in, a gap that had once been explained away as a system glitch. Technology had improved since then. What was once a shrug became a curiosity. The data was pulled again, reconstructed with newer tools, and the gap sharpened into something more defined. It wasn't proof. It was possibility. Investigators revisited people long cleared, approaching them now with the soft confidence of time. Years had passed. Defenses lowered. Memories shifted. Some details emerged that hadn't before, not because they were hidden, but because they had not seemed important at the time. Comment made in passing. A visit remembered vaguely. Each addition was small, but together they began to tilt the picture, just enough to notice. The victim's routine, once thought unremarkable, was scrutinized again. Patterns that looked random were reclassified as habits. Habits implied predictability. Predictability implied opportunity. Someone who knew those rhythms could move through the day unnoticed, slipping into the margins where witnesses rarely look. The theory hardened. This was not a crime of impulse. It was a crime of patience. Public interest flickered back to life when a local paper ran a retrospective piece. Ohio cold case still haunts investigators. The headline read. Old photos resurfaced. Old quotes were recycled. The story felt familiar, but something about it felt unfinished, as if the past were leaning forward, trying to speak. Tips followed. Most were echoes of earlier speculation. A few were new, shaped by years of private reflection. One tip, delivered quietly by phone, stood out for its restraint. No accusations, no drama, just a memory that had aged poorly. The caller described a conversation overheard years ago, a sentence that had not made sense then but now felt heavier. Investigators listened, asked careful questions, and wrote it down. The name mentioned was familiar. Too familiar. It had been in the file from the beginning. Background checks were reopened with renewed intensity. Financial records were re-examined, this time with algorithms that could detect subtle anomalies. A transaction once lost in the noise now appeared slightly out of place. Not illegal, not incriminating, just unexpected. Investigators circled it, adding it to a growing cluster of unexpected details that seemed to orbit the same individual. Interviews resumed, this time with a different tone. Less formal, more conversational. Detectives let silences stretch, watching how people filled them. They noticed when stories were told too smoothly, when details arrived rehearsed rather than recalled. None of it was enough. Not yet. But the shape of the investigation was changing, narrowing almost imperceptibly. The evidence room became a site of renewed pilgrimage. Items once handled with resignation were now examined with curiosity. A fiber was compared against updated databases. A trace sample was retested using methods unavailable in 2003. The results were incremental, not explosive, but they leaned in the same direction, hinting at contact, proximity, presence. Still, the case resisted closure. For every step forward, there was a reminder of how much time had eroded. Witnesses had moved away. Some had died. Memories blurred at the edges, vulnerable to suggestion. Defense attorneys, should the case ever reach them, would have a field day with the gaps. Investigators knew this. It made them cautious. A wrong move now could collapse years of fragile progress. The family watched from a distance, learning to read tone rather than words. When detectives called more often, hope stirred. When months passed without contact, it settled back into something quieter, heavier. They lived with the case the way others live with chronic pain. Always present, sometimes sharper, never gone. Inside the department, there was debate. Some argued the case was being forced, that coincidence was being mistaken for convergence. Others believed the pattern was too consistent to ignore. Meetings stretched late into the evening, voices low, tempers controlled. No one wanted to be the detective who chased a ghost. No one wanted to be the one who walked away just before the truth surfaced. The name at the center of the renewed focus remained just that, a name. No public accusation, no arrest, just a growing sense of gravity pulling the investigation inward. Surveillance was considered, then shelved. Without probable cause, options were limited. The case demanded patience, the same quality that had likely enabled the crime in the first place. As the 10th anniversary approached, The weight of time pressed harder. The case was scheduled for a comprehensive review, a last attempt to consolidate everything learned into a coherent theory. Files were stacked. Notes were compared. Timelines were redrawn. The goal was simple and impossible. See the whole picture at once. Somewhere in that process, a detail shifted from the margins to the center. It had been there since the beginning, noted, dismissed, filed away. Now, viewed through the lens of everything else, it looked different. Not louder, clearer. The kind of clarity that makes a room feel suddenly smaller. No one said it aloud yet. They didn't need to. The air changed. The case, long resistant, seemed to pause, as if listening. The detail that refused to stay buried was not dramatic. It did not arrive wrapped in urgency or spectacle. It was a line in an early report, a single observation made by an officer still learning the rhythms of homicide scenes. At the time, it had been acknowledged, categorized, and set aside. Years later, under the harsh light of reevaluation, it felt different, less like background noise and more like a quiet signal. It involved timing, not the broad strokes of the day, but a narrow window measured in minutes. A moment when something happened that should not have happened, or did not happen when it should have. In 2003, the explanation had seemed reasonable enough. Equipment lag. Human error. Now, with technology catching up and assumptions stripped away, the explanation felt thin. Investigators rebuilt the window carefully. They layered datasets that once existed in isolation, call records against movement logs, routine schedules against environmental cues. Patterns emerged where randomness had once been assumed. The window narrowed. The crime no longer floated in an undefined stretch of time. It settled into a specific pocket of the day, sharp-edged and unforgiving. That pocket had implications. It overlapped with only a handful of people's known movements. Most were easily eliminated. One was not. The name surfaced again, heavier this time, pulling other details into alignment. Proximity, opportunity, knowledge of routine. None of it was new. What was new was how neatly it fit once the window closed. Detectives approached the re-examination with restraint, aware of how easily confirmation bias could distort perception. They assigned separate teams to challenge the emerging theory, to break it if possible. Alternative explanations were constructed, stress-tested, discarded. The theory endured. Not unscathed, but intact. A decision was made to quietly expand the scope. Subpoenas were requested for records once thought irrelevant. Digital footprints, faint by modern standards, were recovered from aging systems. An email here, a login there, nothing overtly incriminating. Everything just slightly off, like a door left ajar in an otherwise tidy house. Interviews resumed with sharper focus. Questions were more precise, less forgiving. The person at the center of the inquiry noticed the shift. Body language changed, answers shortened, memory became selective. None of it rose to the level of a confession, but it was enough to be noted, enough to deepen the quiet certainty growing within the investigative team. Outside the department, the world had moved on. New crimes, new crises. The cold case remained largely invisible, its revival occurring in conference rooms and evidence lockers rather than headlines. That invisibility was intentional. Premature attention could contaminate what little remained untainted by speculation. The evidence itself began to speak more clearly as technology advanced. A partial profile, once too fragmented to matter, now yielded comparatives. Not a match, not yet, but closer than ever before. The database returned a short list of possibilities, names that required further exploration. One overlapped with the existing theory. The convergence was subtle but undeniable. Still, the case balanced on a knife's edge. Investigators knew that if they pushed too hard without something solid, they could lose everything. Statutes, procedures, and the simple erosion of memory all conspired against them. They moved carefully, documenting every step, every decision, anticipating the scrutiny that would follow if the case ever resurfaced in court. The family was informed in measured terms. Renewed activity, promising avenues. They had heard variations of this language before, but something in the delivery felt different. More grounded, less hopeful, paradoxically. Hope had burned them too many times. What they sensed now was focus. As the review deepened, a secondary detail emerged, connected loosely to the first. A choice made by the victim that day, minor on its own, significant in context. It altered the sequence of events just enough to explain why certain witnesses remembered nothing unusual. The crime had slipped into the cracks between expectations. This adjustment tightened the narrative further. The case began to resemble a story that could be told from beginning to end without leaps or apologies. Not proven, not complete, but coherent. That coherence was dangerous and exhilarating in equal measure. It suggested that the answer was close enough to touch. Investigators met late into the night, poring over diagrams and timelines, voices low, deliberate. They argued over interpretations, over the weight of circumstantial evidence, over how much was enough. No one wanted to be wrong after coming this far. No one wanted to wait another decade. The person of interest was brought in again, this time under the pretense of routine follow-up. The room was small, the lighting unkind. Questions circled the same events from different angles, testing consistency. There were pauses that stretched too long, corrections that came too quickly, a narrative that felt practiced, then suddenly brittle. When the interview ended, no one declared victory. There was no outburst, no dramatic reveal. But as the door closed and the room emptied, the detectives exchanged a look that did not need translation. The case, long silent, had finally begun to speak in a language they could understand. And with that understanding came a new weight, the knowledge that if they were right, the truth had been close all along, waiting patiently as the years passed. The closer the case drew to coherence, the more fragile it felt. Every new connection brought with it the risk of collapse, the possibility that one flawed assumption could unravel everything. Investigators moved with the caution of people crossing thin ice, aware that the surface held only because it had not yet been tested. They began by isolating the smallest units of the narrative, refusing to trust the story as a whole. Each action was examined on its own terms. Each decision the victim made that day was weighed for motive and consequence. The timeline, now narrower than ever, was treated as a living thing, adjusted by minutes, sometimes seconds, until it either held or broke. What held was the sequence. It explained the quiet. It explained the lack of witnesses. It explained why the scene looked controlled rather than chaotic. It suggested an encounter that did not begin with violence, an interaction that turned lethal only after a moment of hesitation. That hesitation, investigators believed, was the key. It was the space where intent crystallized. Attention returned to the house itself, not as a static crime scene, but as an environment shaped by familiarity. The layout favored someone who knew where light fell at certain hours, where footsteps would creak, where conversations could not be overheard. This was not guesswork. It was inference, built from patterns observed across similar crimes. The conclusion unsettled everyone involved. The perpetrator had moved through the space like a resident, not a stranger. The person of interest's relationship to that space was re-examined. Past visits were confirmed. Casual reasons, social explanations, all perfectly normal, all now newly significant. Familiarity, once innocent, became loaded. Investigators charted those visits against the timeline, finding overlaps that had once been dismissed as coincidence. Coincidence began to feel like avoidance. Financial records added another layer. Nothing dramatic, no sudden windfalls, just a slow, steady pressure that had gone unnoticed at the time. Obligations, expectations, a sense of being trapped. Motive did not announce itself as greed or rage. It emerged as resentment, quiet and cumulative. The investigative team debated how much motive mattered. They knew that juries liked reasons, even when crimes did not require them. The evidence, they argued, had to stand on its own. Circumstantial did not mean weak, but it did mean vulnerable. They needed something that could anchor the theory in physical reality. That anchor seemed to be waiting in the evidence room, A sample that had once been deemed too degraded to matter was sent out again, subjected to methods that did not exist when it was first collected. The process took weeks. Each day passed with a controlled impatience that no one admitted aloud. When the results came back, they were not definitive, but they were directional. The profile was partial, incomplete, but it excluded more people than it included. The narrowing was dramatic. When the name at the center of the investigation remained within the margins of possibility, the room went quiet. No one celebrated. No one spoke. The silence carried more weight than any confirmation could have. Investigators requested additional authority, careful to justify each step. Warrants were drafted with language sharpened by years of restraint. Every assertion was footnoted with documentation, every inference supported by precedent. They anticipated the counterarguments before they were made, building defenses against skepticism not yet voiced. The subject was approached again, this time with less pretense. Questions referenced specifics rather than generalities. Timelines were challenged. Minor inconsistencies were highlighted, not aggressively, but persistently. The effect was cumulative. The room grew tense, the air heavy with unspoken accusation. Still, there was no confession. Only deflection, irritation, a tightening of posture. Outside, the case remained invisible. Inside, it consumed everything. Detectives carried it home, replaying interviews in their minds, waking in the night with new questions. The cold case had become warm, then hot, but it burned unevenly, threatening to scorch those who handled it without care. The family was told that progress was real this time. Not hope, progress. They listened, guarded, afraid to lean too far into the possibility of resolution. Closure, they had learned, was a dangerous word. What they wanted was truth, even if it arrived bruised and incomplete. As the pieces aligned, a troubling thought emerged. If the theory was correct, then the case had not stalled because it was too complex. It had stalled because it was too ordinary. The perpetrator had blended into the background, shielded by normalcy, protected by the assumption that violence announces itself. This violence had whispered. Meetings grew longer. Decisions loomed. The question was no longer whether the case could be solved, but whether it could be proven beyond reasonable doubt. The answer hovered just out of reach, dependent on one more confirmation, one more link that could not be explained away. Somewhere in the chain of evidence, there was a moment that could not be ignored. A choice that had been made, a trace that had been left, a fact that could not be reconciled with innocence. Investigators believed they were close enough to feel the pressure of the years compressing around them. The cold case was no longer patient. It was demanding an ending. Pressure has a sound when it builds slowly. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It settles into rooms, into conversations, into the pauses between words. By the time investigators felt it fully, it had already shaped every decision they were making. The case was no longer an abstract puzzle. It was a living thing, tightening its grip, forcing movement. They returned to the earliest hours again, not because they expected something new to appear, but because repetition had become a strategy. Every pass through the timeline revealed a different contour. This time, they focused on what did not happen. Calls not made. Doors not opened. Routines not followed. Absence, they realized, could be as instructive as presence. One omission stood out. A call the victim almost always made at a specific time to a specific person. Casual. Brief. Unremarkable. On the day of the crime, it never happened. At first, this had been attributed to distraction, to chance. Now, framed by the narrowed window, it took on a different meaning. Something had interrupted the routine before that call could be placed. Investigators asked themselves what kind of interruption would feel familiar enough not to trigger alarm. The answer was obvious and deeply unsettling. The interruption was not perceived as a threat. It was accepted, allowed, welcomed even briefly. That realization collapsed the remaining distance between theory and belief. They mapped the subject's movements again, this time using reconstructed data pulled from devices that had long since been replaced. Old records, archive logs, fragments salvaged from outdated systems. It was imperfect work, but the margins of error no longer mattered as much as the overlap. The overlap was there. Small, precise, undeniable. Still, overlap was not guilt. Investigators needed to push beyond alignment and into contradiction, facts that could not coexist with innocence. They scrutinized statements made years apart, looking for evolution rather than consistency. Truth, they knew, tends to remain stable. Lies adapt. They found adaptation, not in major details but in tone, in emphasis, in the way certain moments were framed. Early statements had been vague where later ones were precise, or precise where earlier ones were vague. The shifts were subtle, but they followed a pattern. The narrative tightened around the same critical moments, as if reinforcing weak points. Another interview was scheduled. This one was different. No casual pretext. No soft opening. The subject was informed, calmly, that the case was active again, that new information had emerged, that cooperation was expected. The reaction was immediate, though restrained. A flicker of irritation. A defensive humor that landed flat. Investigators noted everything. Questions focused on the interruption, on the missed call, on the timing that had once seemed inconsequential. The subject's answers came quickly, then slowed. Explanations layered over one another, growing more complex instead of simpler. Complexity in this context was a red flag. Truth rarely requires ornamentation. When confronted with a discrepancy, the subject corrected themselves, then corrected the correction. It was a small moment, easy to overlook. It became the hinge on which the interview turned. Investigators pressed gently, then firmly. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Still no confession. Just a retreat into practiced calm. Afterward, the team gathered in silence, replaying the recording. No one spoke until it ended. Then, slowly, consensus formed. They were past the point of curiosity. They were approaching accusation. The transition was not triumphant. It was sobering. Accusation carries consequences that cannot be undone. They moved to secure what they could while they still could. Consent was requested and denied. Warrants were refined. Language was sharpened again, every word chosen with care. They knew defense would argue contamination, bias, tunnel vision. They prepared for it meticulously, documenting how each conclusion had been reached independently. The evidence yielded one more quiet shift. A trace, once dismissed as environmental, now compared against a broader dataset, produced a statistical anomaly. Not a match, not even close, but rare enough to matter. Rare enough to suggest proximity that could no longer be waved away. The family was brought in for a longer conversation. Not a briefing. Conversation. Investigators explained what they believed had happened, step by step, without naming names. They watched reactions carefully, not for approval but for resonance. Grief moved differently this time. It was heavier but steadier, anchored by the sense that the story was finally making sense. As weeks passed, the case drew inward, shedding extraneous theories, collapsing into a single relentless line of inquiry. The cold case label began to feel inaccurate, almost insulting. This was no longer a relic. It was active, breathing, demanding resolution. And yet, the final barrier remained. Proof beyond doubt. The kind that survives cross-examination, that endures skepticism, that can carry the weight of decades without cracking. Investigators knew they were one decision away from stepping into a different phase of the case, one where retreat would not be possible. The question was no longer whether the truth was within reach. It was whether they were ready to seize it, knowing that once they did, the years of silence would give way to something louder, more volatile, and impossible to contain. The decision came without ceremony. No raised voices. No dramatic vote. Just a shared understanding that the line had already been crossed, that hesitation now would not preserve the case but weaken it. The investigation shifted into a phase defined less by discovery and more by consequence. Every move from that point forward would leave a mark. They began by consolidating the narrative into its most defensible form. Not the most compelling, Not the most emotional, the most precise. Each inference was stripped back to its foundation. Each assumption challenged one last time. What remained was lean, coherent, and unforgiving. A story that did not rely on luck or interpretation, but on alignment of time, of place, of behavior. Prosecutors were brought in quietly. They listened without interruption, eyes fixed on timelines that had taken years to refine. Questions were sharp, technical, relentless. What could be proven? What could be implied? What would crumble under pressure? Investigators answered with restraint, resisting the urge to oversell. Confidence, they knew, would come from restraint, not enthusiasm. The prosecutors focused on the same vulnerability the detectives feared. Time. Memories fade. Evidence ages. Juries are skeptical of cases resurrected from the past. The response was methodical. Every piece of evidence was anchored to documentation created at the moment it was collected. Chain of custody was pristine. Procedures were intact. The case had not been neglected. It had been waiting. Attention turned to the subject's present life. Years had passed. Circumstances had changed. Stability had settled in, the kind that suggests distance from old mistakes. Investigators knew this would matter in court. They documented it anyway, not to excuse but to contextualize. Crimes do not freeze people in time. They move on even when the past does not. Surveillance, limited but lawful, filled in gaps the old record could not. Patterns emerged that echoed the past in subtle ways, habits of avoidance, routines shaped around control. Nothing criminal, nothing overt, but familiar. The echoes reinforced the theory without needing to announce it. The warrant, when it came, was specific and narrow. It did not sweep broadly. It did not fish. It targeted exactly what the case required and nothing more. Investigators executed it with professionalism that bordered on reverence, aware of the gravity of touching a life shaped by years of assumption and denial. What they found was not a revelation. No hidden trophies. No written confession. Just confirmation. Objects that aligned with known details. Records that filled in blanks. Absences that spoke louder than presences. The kind of evidence that does not shock, but settles heavily once seen. Interviews followed, not just with the subject, but with people in their orbit. Friends, colleagues, family. Time had loosened tongues. Some spoke of moments that had never sat right, of explanations accepted too easily, of unease dismissed as paranoia. None of it stood alone. Together, it formed a chorus of hindsight that was impossible to ignore. The subject was brought in again. This time, there was no pretense of routine. The room was larger, the table bare, the tone formal. Rights were read. The shift was unmistakable. The questions were fewer, sharper, anchored to facts the subject could not sidestep without contradiction. Silence became a tactic. Long stretches where nothing was said, where the weight of evidence filled the room without being named. The subject adjusted posture, cleared their throat, avoided eye contact. When they spoke, it was to correct minor details, to assert control over a narrative already slipping away. Investigators presented the timeline, piece by piece, not as an accusation, but as an invitation to explain. Explain the overlap. Explain the interruption. Explain the traces that should not exist. The subject listened, expression carefully neutral. When the invitation was declined, the refusal was as telling as any admission. The interview ended without confession. It did not need one. By then, the case no longer depended on cooperation. It depended on courage, the willingness to move forward knowing the outcome would be contested, scrutinized, and possibly overturned. Investigators were ready. The arrest was planned with minimal disruption. No cameras tipped off. No spectacle. Just a quiet moment when years collapsed into a single sentence spoken clearly and without malice. The subject's reaction was controlled, almost relieved, as if the waiting too had been a burden. News broke hours later. Headlines were cautious but electric. Ohio 2003 cold case sees arrest. The word stunning appeared more than once. The community reacted in waves. Shock first, then disbelief, then a slow, collective recalibration of memory. Faces were re-examined, stories retold. For the family, the news landed differently, not as closure but as collision. Past and present met without warning, bringing with them grief sharpened by validation. The truth, when it arrived, did not heal, clarified, and clarity carried its own pain. As the night settled over Ohio, the case that had once seemed untouchable entered a new chapter, one louder and more volatile than silence. The cold case was no longer cold. It was exposed, and exposure has a way of changing everything it touches. Exposure did not bring peace. It brought noise. The arrest cracked open a decade of stillness, releasing speculation, outrage, relief, and disbelief in equal measure. The town woke up changed, not because something new had happened, but because something old had finally been named. Conversations that once ended in shrugs now carried sharp edges. People searched their memories with renewed urgency, wondering what they had missed, what they had normalized, what they had unknowingly protected. The accused appeared in court without drama. No outburst, no visible remorse, just a composed exterior that unsettled those who had expected something else. Cameras captured the moment, freezing it into an image that would circulate endlessly, analyzed for meaning it refused to give. The case, once defined by absence, was now defined by restraint. Prosecutors moved carefully, aware that spectacle could poison precision. They laid out the charges with language stripped of flourish, grounding every claim in documentation, dates, and data. The narrative unfolded not as a story of sudden violence, but of inevitability, of a path shaped by proximity, routine, and quiet resentment. The defense listened, already building counterarguments around time, memory, and coincidence. The word cold case echoed through coverage, often paired with disbelief. How could something so old resurface with such force? The answer was technical and human. Evidence had waited. People had waited. Truth, it turned out, had waited too, patient enough to survive neglect. As pretrial motions stacked up, the case slowed again, but this time the pause felt different. It was no longer stagnation. It was preparation. Investigators revisited every step, anticipating attacks on credibility. They rehearsed explanations for decisions made years apart by people who no longer wore the same badges. Consistency became their shield. The defense focused on erosion. Witnesses, they argued, were unreliable. Memories had been shaped by media, by time, by suggestion. Evidence was circumstantial, profiles incomplete, interpretations subjective. They painted a picture of an investigation driven by fixation rather than fact. It was a familiar strategy, and it landed with unsettling ease. Prosecutors countered with structure. They showed how independent strands converged without needing to touch. How timing aligned across systems designed by different entities. How physical traces, though partial, excluded vast swaths of possibility. The case did not hinge on any single revelation. It rested on accumulation. The family attended every hearing, learning the rhythms of procedure, the language of delay. Each appearance reopened wounds they had learned to manage. Grief became public again, examined, commented on, packaged for nightly broadcasts. They endured it because endurance had become habit. Behind the scenes, the accused past was dissected for anything that could tilt perception. Prosecutors resisted temptation. They knew character evidence was a trap. This case would live or die on facts, not feelings. Still, the contrast between public persona and alleged action gnawed at observers. Ordinary, it seemed, had always been the disguise. As trial approached, the community divided quietly. Some believed fiercely in the arrest, clinging to the idea that patience had finally paid off. Others hesitated, wary of condemning someone based on a story resurrected from the past. Doubt found fertile ground in the distance between event and accusation. The courtroom became a theater of restraint. No raised voices, no theatrical objections, just careful questions and carefully weighed answers. Experts spoke about probability, about what science could and could not say. Investigators testified to process, to why decisions were made when they were made. Each word was measured, aware of its potential to sway. The defense pressed hardest on motive. Why now? Why then? Why would someone wait, hesitate, choose that moment? Prosecutors responded not with psychology, but with opportunity. The crime, they argued, did not require a dramatic motive. It required access. It required timing. It required the kind of familiarity that dissolves fear. As days passed, the weight of the years settled over the proceedings. Jurors listened to events described as if they were recent, then remembered that they were not. The distance created friction, a constant reminder of uncertainty. Certainty everyone knew was impossible. The question was whether doubt was reasonable. Outside the courthouse, headlines grew sharper. Stunning arrest, they repeated. Forgotten evidence. The language suggested revelation. Inside, the reality was slower, heavier. Truth, when filtered through law, loses its immediacy. It becomes something to be assembled piece by piece, under rules that favor caution over catharsis. When closing arguments ended, the room felt suspended. The case was handed to 12 people asked to bridge decades with logic and trust. The cold case, once an abstract ache, now balanced on a verdict that could affirm years of work or dismantle it entirely. Whatever happened next, the silence that had defined the case for so long was gone. In its place was a different kind of uncertainty, louder, more public, and just as unforgiving. Deliberation moved slower than anyone expected. Hours stretched into days, each one feeding speculation that leaked from the courthouse into every corner of the town. People read into body language, into the length of lunch breaks, into the absence of news. Silence once again became the loudest element of the case. Inside the jury room, decades collapsed into binders and exhibits. Jurors returned again and again to the same questions, not because the answers were unclear, but because they were heavy. Could coincidence really stack this neatly? Could memory survive this long without distortion? Could someone live an ordinary life while carrying something so unresolved? The law demanded logic, but the case demanded imagination, and imagination was dangerous territory. The partial evidence was examined repeatedly, not as science but as implication. Experts had been careful, almost painfully so, to describe limitations. No absolutes, no declarations, just probability, exclusion, context. For some jurors, the caution inspired trust. For others, it planted doubt. The same restraint that protected the case also exposed its vulnerability. Testimony replayed in their minds. The investigator who spoke about the missed call. The analyst who described the narrow window. The quiet confidence of people who had waited years to be heard. Against it stood the defense's insistence that time itself was the real suspect, that erosion had created patterns where none existed. It was an argument that felt reasonable because it always is. Outside, the family waited without speaking much. They had learned that words could turn treacherous under pressure. Every update from attorneys was filtered through years of guarded expectation. They were not waiting for relief. They were waiting for confirmation that the truth, whatever it was, would finally be acknowledged. When the jury returned, the room changed temperature. People shifted in their seats, breath held unconsciously. The accused stood, expression unreadable, a posture practiced over years of control. The verdict was read slowly, each word landing with deliberate weight. It was not the ending anyone had rehearsed. It was not clean. It was not definitive. It carried qualifiers, careful language that reflected the struggle behind closed doors. Some charges held. Others did not. The decision acknowledged the convergence of evidence without fully surrendering to it. Justice in this form arrived unevenly. The reaction was muted, then fractured. Relief tangled with disappointment. Validation collided with lingering doubt. The cold case, it seemed, resisted even this attempt at finality. It had yielded something, but not everything. Sentencing was scheduled. Appeals were promised. The legal machinery continued its slow, grinding motion, indifferent to emotion. For investigators, the verdict was both affirmation and loss. Years of work recognized, but not crowned. The story they believed in had been accepted, but only partially. The media framed it as closure because media always does. Cold case resolved, they declared, simplifying what could not be simplified. The word resolved echoed hollowly for those who had lived inside the ambiguity. Resolution suggests completion. This felt more like punctuation. A pause, a comma, not a period. The accused was led away without incident. No statement, no glance back. The absence of reaction unsettled observers more than anger would have. It left space for interpretation, and space is where doubt thrives. In the days that followed, the town exhaled unevenly. Some doors closed gently on a chapter they were ready to end. Others stayed open, unwilling to accept an answer that felt incomplete. Conversations resumed, but they were different now, shaped by knowledge rather than mystery. For the family, the verdict was a paradox. It confirmed what they had believed for years, yet it denied them the clarity they had imagined. Grief does not resolve neatly. It adapts, finds new shapes. They learned to carry this outcome the way they had learned to carry everything else, carefully. The case file was updated, stamped, archived again. This time it carried a different weight. Not unsolved, not fully solved, something in between. A reminder that truth and proof do not always align, even when they travel the same road. And still, the story refused to settle. Appeals would reopen wounds. Debates would continue. The cold case, now officially changed, remained emotionally intact, its core still warm with unanswered questions that no verdict could extinguish. In Ohio, people would remember where they were when the news broke, then where they were when the verdict came down. Memory once again became part of the evidence, subjective, fragile, enduring. The case had moved forward, but it had not moved on. Time resumed its uneven pace after the verdict, lurching forward in public while dragging its feet in private. Appeals were filed with the precision of habit, each one reopening arguments that had never truly closed. Legal language replaced headlines, dense and procedural, draining drama from what had once felt electric. The case slipped from front pages into specialized columns, followed only by those who could not let it go. Investigators returned to their routines, but the routines felt altered, as if the case had recalibrated their sense of scale. New files landed on desks. New crimes demanded attention. Still, the old one lingered, referenced in passing, cited in training, invoked whenever someone asked whether patience mattered. It did. But patience, they had learned, did not guarantee satisfaction. The appeals process unfolded predictably. Arguments about evidence admissibility, about evolving science applied to old samples, about whether narrative had overwhelmed neutrality. Each filing was precise, restrained, almost antiseptic. It stripped the case back to abstractions, removing faces, voices, years. For the family, reading those documents felt like watching their loss translated into a foreign language. The accused remained largely silent. Statements were issued through counsel, carefully worded, devoid of emotion. That silence became its own kind of presence, interpreted endlessly by those still searching for meaning. Some read it as defiance, others as resignation. The truth, whatever it was, remained inaccessible, sealed behind strategy. Community memory began to shift again. With the immediacy gone, the case settled into something quieter, less volatile. People spoke of it with the familiarity reserved for long storms, still dangerous but no longer surprising. The house, once avoided, changed hands. Fresh paint covered old walls. Life asserted itself as it always does. Investigators revisited the evidence one final time, not because they expected revelation, but because ritual demanded it. They wanted to know, privately, whether anything had been missed that could still be found. They found nothing new. What existed had already been seen, interpreted, argued. The case had given all it would give. The family marked anniversaries differently now, not with vigils but with quiet gatherings. The absence remained, but it had been named, acknowledged by a system that rarely speaks with certainty. That acknowledgement mattered, even if it fell short of the clarity they once imagined. Public interest flickered occasionally, reignited by emotion or a ruling, then faded again. Each flicker brought a familiar mix of hope and fatigue. The cold case label persisted in conversation, despite its official status. Labels, it seemed, outlived accuracy. One investigator, nearing retirement, took the file home one last time. Not the originals, just copies. He read through it slowly, without the urgency that had once driven him. Patterns that once demanded explanation now felt settled. Not resolved, but understood. Understanding, he realized, was not the same as peace. The appeal was decided without spectacle. Some elements affirmed, others adjusted. The outcome shifted details without altering the core. The case remained intact, imperfect, heavy with years. There was no collective gasp, no renewed outrage. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the system had spoken again. As seasons turned, the case receded further into institutional memory. New detectives heard about it the way myths are taught, lessons embedded in story. Pay attention to small things. Respect time. Don't confuse silence with absence. The case became a compass point, a reminder of how easily certainty can slip away. For the family, life continued in measured steps. Joy returned in fragments, never whole but real enough to matter. Grief softened at the edges, though it never disappeared. The case no longer defined every day, but it remained present, like a scar that aches in certain weather. Ohio moved on as places do. Streets filled. Schools cycled generations. The crime, once an open wound, became a line in local history. But history, unlike headlines, does not close its books completely. It leaves pages dog-eared, passages underlined, questions unanswered. The cold case had traveled far from the morning it began, carrying with it years of silence, effort, and restraint. It had been warmed by attention, exposed by scrutiny, altered by judgment. What it had not been was erased. And in that persistence lay its final weight, the knowledge that some stories do not end when the law speaks, that some truths remain suspended between what is known and what can be proven, leaving behind a residue that time can dull but never fully remove. In the end, what lingered was not the verdict, not the appeals, not even the years of investigation layered like sediment over a single moment in 2003. What lingered was the question people stopped asking out loud but never stopped carrying. The kind of question that does not demand an answer so much as it demands space. The house, long since changed, still held a geometry that felt wrong to those who remembered. Light entered the windows differently now, refracted through new curtains, new lives, but the shape of the rooms had not changed. Walls remember, floors remember. Places absorb what happens inside them and release it slowly, over decades, in ways no renovation can fully erase. The victim's name remained etched into local consciousness, not as a headline anymore, but as a reference point. Before the case, after the case, time in that town bent slightly around it. Newcomers learned the story in fragments, usually late, usually from someone who lowered their voice instinctively, as if the past might overhear. For investigators, the case became something quieter than frustration and heavier than pride. It followed them into other investigations, into instinctive pauses before dismissing a detail, into a heightened awareness of how easily the ordinary can turn fatal. They knew the record would always show an outcome, but they also knew how much of the truth had lived in spaces no transcript could capture. The family lived with a version of closure that never quite closed. Justice had spoken, but justice speaks in legal terms, not emotional ones. There were no answers to why trust had been misplaced, why familiarity had been weaponized, why the moment of hesitation had tipped into violence. Those questions did not fade. They simply lost their audience. Sometimes, late at night, the case resurfaced online, dissected by strangers armed with hindsight and confidence. Threads bloomed and withered. Theories clashed. Certainty was declared cheaply. None of it changed anything. The truth had already passed through the only forum that mattered, and it had emerged altered, constrained by what could be carried forward and what could not. What remained was the residue, the sense that something essential had slipped through the cracks of time, that the crime had been solved enough to move forward, but not enough to let go. This was the quiet cost of cold cases warmed too late. Resolution without release. The town learned to live with that ambiguity. It folded it into its identity the way communities fold in floods, factory closures, losses too large to individualize. Life continued not because the past was resolved, but because it had to. Morning routines resumed. Phones rang again. Silence returned, familiar and uneasy. And yet, on certain mornings, when the light was flat and the air felt heavy with possibility, people still remembered. They remembered how easily a day like that one could fracture, how little noise it took, how violence did not always announce itself with chaos, but could arrive quietly, carried by someone who knew exactly where they were going. The cold case, officially closed, never truly shut. It remained open in memory, in caution, in the collective understanding that some answers come too late to heal and too early to forget. It stood as a reminder that truth and certainty are not the same thing, and that justice, even when delivered, can leave behind shadows it does not claim. Somewhere between what was proven and what was believed, the story settled into its final shape, not a conclusion but a warning, that the past is patient, that it waits, and that when it finally speaks, it rarely says everything people hope to hear. The phone rang that morning in 2003, and nothing in that house was ever the same again. The echo of that ring carried forward through years of silence, through evidence and arguments and judgment, until it became something else entirely. A low, persistent hum beneath the surface of ordinary life. That hum never stopped,